92. The Gerry Ryan Show, Monday to Friday, 9 till 12 on 2FM.
Ray, good morning to you.
Morning, Gerry. How are you?
Very well, welcome. You were listening to what I was saying about Eamon Casey, and as you know, we're running a Ryan Line online poll. 82% say yes, the Bish should be brought back.
Something I think I'd expect, you know. The majority would say yes, get him back. Why not?
Now, you're ringing us from, where?
Fortementora.
Really? And you're listening to the programme there, yeah?
Yes, I was, until I must have been the heat waves that knocked off my signal from the media player, you know, so I can't get you back again, but I got you now on the phone.
All right, and you feel strongly about Eamon Casey, do you?
Well, the thing about it is, I mean, you know, for years I've sort of thought that any priest should be able to get married and have kids and have a family. It's about the only bloody religion in the world that they don't have partners and get married. You know, what's the problem? I think it was near time they started playing catch up with the rest of the world and let them get on with it. Let him marry let him marry the mother of his son. What's the problem?
Well, really, what I don't understand in the case of Eamon Casey, compared to other people who are locked up in jail and people who are still being investigated, and of course we have the situation developing with Desmond Connell in court today, seeking to stop certain files containing possibly privileged information in relation to sex abuse cases. You know, it's still a hugely sensitive issue. And this guy didn't do anything like that. Yet he was in exile for years. He's 80 years of age now. Why would they not let him say Mass in public anymore? Or again?
I think they put him up there. Like as some sort of an excuse, you know. We've got everything right now. We're getting on top of all this sort of paedophilia and all the rest of it with kids and all the rest of it, you know. So they're showing an example for him.
Yeah, but I mean, he's the wrong target. He's the complete wrong target.
Of course, yes.
Absolutely. All right, Ray. And what's the weather like where you are at the moment?
Still hovering around 70. Blue skies, a little whiff of white cloud, and, well, someone has to suffer it, I suppose, you know.
Oh, you swine. I take it that you're living there permanently, yeah?
Well, sort of a few months at a time.
Life is so difficult, isn't it? Decisions. Where will I go to next? All right, Ray, enjoy your day and thanks for the call. Okay, and indeed, good morning to anybody listening online, wherever you may be. We have an email here from David McDermott. Dear Gerry, it's evening here in Japan, but thanks to the internet, I'm able to listen to you live. Your show and Batch Love are the two things I miss most about Ireland. About Bishop Casey, I couldn't agree more. That man has already served more than the penance for going against the current customs of the church. I would like to remind everyone that the celibacy law in the church was not always the case. Fathering a child is not a crime, but rather the sign of a normal, healthy man. More persistently, why are priests not allowed to marry, or more pertinently, surely a celibate clergy inevitably will turn the clergy a haven for, let's say, people with questionable intentions that seek a position of respect in the community. Well, that's my own opinion entirely, and I think that's exactly what happened to the church, was that for a period of time Christian brothers and priests were created, drawn upon certain elements in the community that were unsavoury and utterly inappropriate, and were drawn to these orders and to this institution because they thought it was a good place to carry on. They were right to their nefarious activities. The many scandals that have come out prove that. Leave the man alone, maybe let him get married too. Well, I don't think at 80 years of age Eamon Casey's going to be bothered making that plunge. He'd be mad if he did. All the best from Kobe. That's where they do the beef, isn't it? Kobe beef. Oh, yeah. It's only about 80 quid a steak, but nonetheless. You know how they do the Kobe beef? Well, they sing to the cattle. They keep them under heated lamps. They massage sake into their flesh. And I believe even perform acts of sexual relief on them. I don't know whether that's true or not. That might be mythological. But they're happy. They're very happy cattle. And hence the fact that you pay for the privilege of having a Kobe beef steak. But by Jiminy, you can tell when you bite into a Kobe that he was happy. Sure, wouldn't you be happy as well if you were being massaged with poaching and given relief whenever you need it? You know, I mean, what's the harm in that?
Operation Transformation on the Gerry Ryan Show, sponsored by GE Money FlexiLoan, the loan that changes with you.
Absolutely. As Operation Transformation enters its 5th week, some of our leaders have already completed their challenges. Taxi driver Violet O'Shea, she went scuba diving. That was very impressive. Truck driver Donal Looney went salsa dancing. That was just basically embarrassing. And Evelyn Farrell went mountain climbing with her partner. That was very impressive indeed. This morning, Ollie Hannah Murta took a flight to Cork, and she's on the line. Why did she take a flight to Cork? Well, I don't know, but I will in a moment, and so will she. Ollie, good morning.
Good morning, Gerry. How are you?
Very good. I believe the flight was a little delayed.
Just a little bit. We made a kind of a mad dash to the departure gates, but we got on okay. There was no problems.
And are you in good form?
Yes, very good form. It is absolutely glorious in Cork this morning.
And
the weather is beautiful.
And how was your weekend?
Good weekend. Very good. It was cold in County Monaghan, I have to say. It was very cold, but it was a good weekend, yeah.
And in terms of your exercise regime and your diet, have things been going well?
Yes, very well this weekend.
Have you been a good bunny?
I have been a very good bunny.
Good girl.
I have.
Now, in the words of Willy Wonka, I've got a golden envelope.
Okay.
Now, I have no idea whatsoever, Ollie.
Apparently nobody has any idea.
I have no idea whatsoever. Is there anything that you really hope it's not?
Really, I think army manoeuvres would be my. It would be the one thing that I would have to really summon up everything within me to enjoy now, I have to say.
Army manoeuvres?
Yeah.
What if it was something that involved a G-string?
As long as I'm not the person wearing it, it's okay.
And running and jumping up and down.
Okay.
Look, I haven't got the faintest idea. It could involve Homer Simpson's nuclear power station. It could involve Mr. Burns' gorilla vest. I have no idea, but I do have a golden envelope in my hand.
Yeah.
Will I open it?
Go on, Gerry.
It contains your task, your challenge, Ollie Hannah Murta. Here we go.
Okay. I have butterflies.
You've butterflies, have you?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, genuinely, I have not seen this.
Okay.
It comes from Carl Henry.
Oh, well, love Carl.
Yeah, we all love Carl. You know, Carl's a nice guy, but that doesn't mean anything, really.
No.
Dear Ollie, are you listening? Faire attention, s'il vous plaît. Dear Ollie, one of your ambitions has been to get involved in water sports, but you felt that your weight had held you back. That is, until now. Your weight loss and newfound confidence will help you to realise this ambition. What could he be talking about? Your local water skiing club is closed for winter. The water in Monaghan is much too cold. But we're taking you to the southern seas, to much warmer climates and climes, and much warmer waters. You are going to Ireland's, I know you thought it was somewhere in the Canaries, you are going to Ireland's only water ski school, where you will be instructed by 20 times and indeed current national champion Barry Galvin. By the end of today, Ollie Hannah Murta, you will be water skiing on Inishcora Lake. I know you can do it. That's what Carl says.
I can do it, Gerry. Absolutely.
Oh, the confidence is...
Bring it on.
The blowback from you there, the confidence is palpable. Oh, well, look, I've tried it. I was useless.
Okay.
Utterly useless. It's all to do with relaxing. It's all to do with getting that spring in your knees. And it's all to do with, having faith in what you're being told. Every single time I tried it, I just went straight over onto my face.
That doesn't fill me with confidence, I have to say.
Well, at least it gives you a get out of jail card.
Yeah, true.
At the end of it all, you'll be able to turn around to the camera and go, well, Gerry couldn't do it either. So, but I'm putting my money on you that you're going to be able to do this.
Excellent, Gerry.
Yeah, I might even give Paddy Powers a buzz and place a bet. And I want, come Thursday at 8:30 on RTE1 television, I want to see footage of you on one leg going backwards
Oh, absolutely.
On
Gerry,
Inniscarra Lake.
absolutely.
All right. You get on with it and enjoy. At the
you
very
very much.
least, enjoy. And do take care of yourself. And by the way, if you're injured or killed,
Yes.
make sure they catch it on film, will you?
Oh, I definitely will be running at all times.
Good morning, Ollie.
Thank you.
Take
Bye.
care. There
Bye.
she is. There she is. I think that's a good challenge. Have to say, I was absolutely. I mean, I've never managed it. I've tried it a few times. Same goes for skating in New York on the rink in Central Park. I couldn't do that either. Flat on my arse. Looked like I'd wet myself, my kids, and the rest of my family. Took to it like the proverbial ducks to water. Will Ollie Hannah Murta be a proverbial duck to water skiing? We shall see.
2FM.
Why has the idea that women are from Venus and men are from Mars become so popular? Perhaps the world's favourite explanation for so much of our intersexual differences. Are we really, in actual fact, from different emotional planets? And if so, does that really make any difference? And does it make real intergalactic communication actually impossible? Do we simply speak different languages? Jenny Houston has been reading The Myth of Mars and Venus by Deborah Cameron, which debunks one of the most popular cultural notions of modern times. Jenny, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Yeah, I mean,
I have to say now, first of all, I bought the Mars and Venus thing completely, still do.
Do you?
Yeah.
Well, see, that's the thing, is that I think it's really convenient to buy it. And I think that I probably, until I read this, would have thought, yeah, sure, we speak differently, we miscommunicate all the time, we're constantly frustrated. And certainly, if you're fighting with a boyfriend or spouse, or you're single or whatever, then of course you're convinced that all the reasons that things aren't working out are because we're completely different. But what she really looks at is, I mean, Deborah Cameron is seriously sort of attacking it on the basis of research, kind of going, okay, is this true? Well, if so, can I find a single piece of research that can thoroughly back it up? Or that, and she hasn't been able to find any research to back up most of the things from
except for the
that
daily
book.
24/7 anecdotal evidence of all of humanity.
Well, see, no, it's interesting when
What is she saying anyway?
Well, she's basically saying that, I mean, for starters, the research debunks the smaller myths that contribute to the Venus and Mars thing, that women talk more than men. Research apparently suggests opposite, or that women's talk is cooperative and that men's talk is competitive. And research shows that both sexes engage in both kinds of talk. And I think we both know, and we've discussed this many times, of course women are competitive, and women use competitive language all the time. So that notion of women always being cooperative, we know that's rubbish. So we can dispel that one right away just using our common sense and knowing the way that we operate. So like that whole notion that men and women sort of systematically misunderstand one another, research has shown no good evidence that that's the case. So then it has to...
I would agree with that. There is a difference between being competitive in your conversation and wishing to dominate the conversation. They're two quite different things. I think men try to dominate conversations and women compete. I mean, I've been often accused, and not just by my family, but by psychiatrically talented and qualified people, of using a big, loud, articulate, booming voice to overrule everything else anybody else was saying.
Yeah, well, I mean, loudness. I always think that that's the North American thing. When I go back to Canada, I notice it even on the West Coast, that the Canadians, when they want to be heard, they just talk louder. And I'm like, talking louder doesn't make you right, or it doesn't make it any more socially acceptable. But I think it is a North American trait. You got to go, Gerry, I'm talking up here, and all of a sudden it's like, anyway, everybody stops listening to you, listens to me. And of course that wouldn't be the case because you've got the great baritone. But I just think that there's all these little things like that. But I mean, you're right in that it's been sort of decided, or we have a thing that men speak directly and women speak indirectly. Of course, that's not always the case at all. But that they're generally speaking, that seems to be a thing. But of course, that was possibly very much a cultural thing. That women, again, is that thing rare to be kind of, a little
Women probably had to code a lot of what they said because there wasn't the cultural green light.
Certainly historically, it wasn't appropriate for a woman to just sort of...
Even in recent history, if you look at women trying to get their way in society or within a relationship or in the home, before women were given the vote, before Amelia Pankhurst, a woman would have to speak in code, whereas a man wouldn't.
And it was much more a case of, well, possibly might it be, blah, 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 blah. And it was really that sort of, dare I voice an opinion, or dare I suggest? Exactly. But that, again, it's historical. So basically what she's saying is that the myth of Mars and Venus it's not really about sexual differences or communication differences between the sexes, but rather a change in society that's causing the conflict. It has nothing to do with our communication, but rather the role of women in modern society that is causing the conflict. And she's also, I don't even think controversially, I think that we can see how this might be the case. She's suggesting that it's also a middle class issue. And she really backs us up, and this is kind of fascinating. And when you sort of look at the research on it, it makes sense. She looks at the 1962 study called Blue Collar Marriage, and it was done by a sociologist, Mira Komorowski, I believe. She reported that the working class American women she interviewed did not generally expect to have extended conversations with their husbands. In their communities, sex segregation was extensive. Basically, in everyday companionship and emotional support, they relied on their female friends and their kin. Most did not regard this as settling for second best. To them, it seemed rather eccentric to want your spouse to be your best friend. And when you think about that, going back to the 60s, if, the guy's working all day long, the women are at home with the kids, with each other, they'd all pool together. So they'd all be minding the kids together. They'd be nattering away, talking to each other. Their voices were heard with each other. Their mothers, their sisters, their aunts, their cousins, their best friends, all the women were together.
Talking for
Ireland, for America, exactly. And you see that the world over, whether it's India or Japan or wherever, that women in that sort of community, they would be together. And so that really the attitude and typical of traditional societies and traditional working class communities, that's the way it was. And the idea of companionate marriage, in which partners do most things together, spend a lot of time interacting and regard one another as friends, it's essentially a modern middle class one. That whole thing of it's basically this companionate marriage thing is made possible by the fact that middle-class men and women do not, in fact, inhabit separate social worlds. And the whole premise of the myth of Mars and Venus is that
because the apartheid that existed between us is broken down, not completely, but to a large degree.
So the whole notion of the myth of Mars and Venus is that men and women inhabit completely different social worlds. And of course, in middle-class society, where women have education and have access to education, men and women do not inhabit separate social worlds. And this companionate marriage is made necessary by the fact that middle-class men and women generally do not have close-knit, locally based networks of same-sex friends and kin that supported Komorowski's subjects. So really, the premise then moves on that all of our miscommunication is the economic and social changes, that the greater mobility, smaller families, increasing rates of divorce, they've weakened these bonds that held traditional families and communities together. And the result is that by reducing the size of most people's support networks, it makes them more reliant on a small number of significant others. And that whole thing is that we expect more from the communication with our spouse or partner.
What's she saying, though, that this is leading to? Because one of the things at least we're comfortable with by accepting Venus and Mars is that you go, well, the reason that I cocked up that is because I said something utterly ridiculous. She interpreted it in a different way. I sound like I've got a different value system. She's completely disappointed. I'm not. And there's a whole selection of things that were sort of good crutches for you to explain why you failed or why you succeeded at any given moment. And in fact, sometimes were useful for holding things together. But what she's saying, that's gone.
No, I guess what she's really looking at is the fact that because we expect more we expect to have so much more communication with our partners in this sort of modern middle class world.
Men don't expect that.
Well, sometimes, I don't necessarily think that's true. I know of couples where they've traveled for somebody's job, so all of a sudden they've moved. They're in a different city, in a different place. It might be here that people have moved. They've gone to Australia or they've gone to London. They've gone to whatever for somebody's career, and they've moved over to be with their boyfriend or soon to be husband or wife. And before you know it, you don't have the same networks.
No, you've just got each other.
Exactly. You don't have your family, you don't have your friends you grew up with, and you've got each other. And so both of you are relying on each other, and that's bound to lead to tension. And the myth of Mars and Venus is saying that it's, that it's a gender problem, but it's really a social problem. And
okay, now I'm beginning to understand.
Yeah,
but I really do. Maybe sure women feel exactly the same. Men do not go, oh gosh, I wish she was talking to me more.
Well, see, the thing is that she's saying that the more similar men and women become, the more they're in direct competition for jobs, for status, for money, for leisure time, and personal freedom. And I think personal freedom is the biggie. And she talks about her parents who married in the mid-50s. They never argued about who should take out the trash, pick up the groceries, wash dishes, drive the car, choose what to watch on TV, or make financial decisions. Nor were they ever in conflict about whose job came first or whose life had to be fitted around domestic commitments.
Because it was all laid down in stone.
Exactly. These things were settled in advance by the basic fact of gender difference. So for couples today, everything is up for negotiation, and that has potential to lead to conflict. And
I couldn't agree more. Utterly.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. So it's not that we communicate differently. It's that suddenly, by women having education and by women being able to have everything that men can have, all these things are up for negotiation. And perhaps it's just that men really wish it wasn't the case.
And also, I do think that there was a lot of smouldering going on. You know, for instance, I recall my own parents' relationship. My father would have been very old-fashioned. My mum would have been fairly compliant, I suppose, but certainly would have been a bit more rock and roll than he was. Okay. So he'd go off, he was the dentist, right? So he'd be in the white coat telling everybody stuff. Yeah. Oh, Dr. Ryan, Dr. Ryan. So nobody said to him, I think that's bullshit, right? So he'd spend the whole day with people going, oh, really? Wow, that's amazing. Then he'd come home and he'd make a couple of speeches about, you know, the gold standard. I don't think we should break from it. He'd have his dinner and, you know, my mother would listen to him, right? And that was it. So everything she did to influence their lives would be done surreptitiously, round the corner, in code. Yeah. And really, when I look back on it now, she ran the house really and ran his business and ran his finance and ran the kids. Yeah. But it didn't look like that. Like, it looked like this kind of Admiral Nelson character was just a
deferential role from your mother.
And why did it stay like that? Because they were able to go, well, this is what women do, this is what men do. Now that's collapsed.
It is, and basically what she's saying is that basically it's a social problem, and by saying that it's innate, that it's a planetary problem, that men and women are from different planets, and that we communicate differently, and that's just biology, that's nature, is ridiculous, and it's clearly ridiculous based on research and everything else. That there's no proof of that. That really what's causing all this conflict is the dramatic changes in society that we're still getting used to, and we're still trying to come to terms with. And when you look at it in that context, you go, she's absolutely right. And she makes some really interesting points. She looks at sort of the research of like women's magazines communicating to women about how to talk to men and how to not have problems with men. And things like Glamour magazine in giving you advice on workplace things that speak directly to male subordinates. Women tend to shy away from giving a blatant order, but men find the indirect approach manipulative and confusing. And so women are told how to speak to men. And she's talking about, you know, the direct versus indirect approach, and that while both styles are equally valid, the difference between them can lead to misunderstanding. So what Deborah Cameron is asking is that she's saying that basically it raises two questions. First, if men and women, if our styles are equally valid, then why does it always seem to be women who are told they must accommodate to men's preferences, even apparently when the men are their subordinates? And is avoiding male-female miscommunication an exclusively female responsibility, essentially? And second, why is it assumed that indirectness causes miscommunication in the first place? Because, and she shows loads of examples where we know perfectly well what somebody is saying something, even if they're saying it indirectly. Like, so if a woman say, perhaps it might be a good idea, darling, for you to go to bed. You know, the fact that she's indirectly saying it, he probably knows exactly what she means.
Because she's probably what she's saying.
Exactly, because he's probably pissed or he's probably too much to drink or whatever else. And it's, you know, it's that thing of like, there's so many other things at play. And
there's so much flux involved as well. For instance, going back to the couple described in the mid-50s, that were my parents. Okay, now then you've got three boys growing up watching this and going, all right, that's what I look. Dad says something like, I believe that Jesus Christ was a spaceman. Yeah. And Mum goes, really? Is that right? Darling, thank you. And so, like, why can't I say? When I said something like that at home last night and I was told to shag off. Yeah. Why? So I think then you've got, what really is, men are hunters now. Men are like going, oh God.
Well, they're kind of be taken to task on things, aren't they? And the thing is that, you know...
we haven't been prepared for that.
No, and possibly mourning it a little bit. And in a way, you can't blame them.
Baby, it was better to be in charge.
Oh, yeah, sure, you know. And so, like, John Gray is... Yeah. I mean, we're all laughing.
So, come on. It was better to be... Can you imagine what it was like
the party's over.
Oh, I would like a large whiskey, and then I'll be upstairs for some one-sided sex, and then I would like to watch the telly. Or, there was no no television in those days. I would like to read the latest Charles Dickens novel. I mean, it sounds pretty good to me.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, so no wonder that sort of the modern world and modern navigation is causing some tension. You know, it's no great surprise, especially if you're the new man, the modern man, who had a not so modern parental role model. You know, because you're mourning what your dad had, and you're trying to navigate the new world. At the same time, most men aren't mourning their wives having income. That's, you know, one of the benefits of modern society. But, you know, these are all these different things. But she doesn't go into any of that. That's just me speculating. But she's talking about John Gray, who's the author of the whole Venus and Mars thing that Deborah Cameron is debunking. And she's talking about how he says that, like, she is asking, does he really believe that men cannot process indirect requests from women? And if that's the case, then how does he explain the fact that men quite frequently make indirect requests to women? So the whole thing is that men don't understand if you say, darling, the groceries are in the car. You know, he's saying that if you want a man to take the groceries from the car, you'd have to say, would you take the groceries from the car and bring them into the house? Whereas if your wife says to you, the groceries in the car, common sense would indicate to you, you go, okay, you use your past knowledge and go, groceries belong in the house, not in the car. I know this from, you know, experience. So probably saying as she's done the groceries,
but you're missing something here. You're missing that men do not like to be told what to do.
Exactly.
So that's the whole thing.
That's
so
the whole
you're
point.
watching the telly. Okay, you're watching the development of the Flying Sunderland Sea Coastal Air Sea Rescue plane during
Snore.
the second round. Okay, so I'm watching that. That's very important for me to keep abreast of the latest discoveries regarding that.
Of course.
And the Whittle jet engine is coming up after that. I've been looking forward to watching that. So now somebody's telling you that there's groceries in the car. Now somebody's telling you that the bin is overflowing, and I shouldn't have to tell you the bin is overflowing. Now somebody's saying, and so really what's going on is that you go, yeah, I know all about that. I know all about it. I know where it's meant to go. I know what these things are, and I will do them in a while. But I don't want to be told to be doing them right now.
Well, you hit the button on the head, and this is her whole point. Like, you've nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. She's saying that most, and if not, well, some, she's saying some, I would say most, misunderstandings are tactical rather than real. And that you're pretending not to understand when somebody wants you to do something that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
And it's not really that men and women are speaking different languages and that men don't understand the garbage is overflowing or that the groceries are in the car. That's rubbish. It's that, as you've said, you're watching something you don't want to do and nobody likes being told to do anything.
Don't be telling me to do it now.
Yeah. And she gives
because if you give in, you feel, okay, I'm just a friggin' genital-less servant.
But at the same time, you know, she's just done the groceries, so she's done a task. And
but
she's
you see,
saying,
wouldn't it be so much
easier
until men become completely hermaphrodite? Wouldn't it be so much easier to just go, when you get a chance, will you bring in the groceries when you're ready?
But that's indirect as well.
No, but the guy will go, well, I'm ready. So that means I'm sort of in charge of the issue here. So that's okay.
Well, so you're saying that basically that male and female communication will be fine so long as women are in charge, so long as men are in charge.
Well, if they feel like he's still going to be bringing in the groceries, right?
We're still back to the same
thing. He can't.
You want to be in charge.
He can't handle being told to do this. And this relates to a whole load of things, not just the groceries. He can't handle being told to do it right now.
Yeah, I don't think women are really big on instruction either. I don't think any of us are. I think it's human nature. I think the problem is maybe that historically men were given that role just by society or whatever.
The man had never been talking about the groceries because he wouldn't have bought them in the first place. We're continuing to fight over the whole issue, but I'm representing the male species. I still firmly believe now, and I'm kind of willing to go down. You're saying it's socialising, right?
I think it is, yeah. It's a social tension.
Men get desperately upset, really upset by being told to do something now. And that can include, I demand an immediate emotional response for you regarding something that's happening, and the guy's going, shit, I haven't got a response. And stop saying that to me. Stop saying that you need to know it now.
Yeah.
But you were meant to be thinking about it. We've been worried about this for the past year. Why can't you say something about it now? Because I can't. And I don't like you cornering me over this. Now, then on the domestic issues even in the workplace, I presume it can happen as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose the fact that we've gotten into relationships sort of makes everybody go, oh, it's about couples or whatever. But what she's saying is that these old myths that Mars and Venus are bringing up, that it's detrimental to men as well to women, because these myths are that women are better communicators, that women are better talkers, and that there's massive discrimination in workplace hiring, because if there's a job where communication is a skill, that the people have said in interviews that they'd prioritize women because they believe that women are better communicators based on these old myths. But
that
it's not
bullshitters.
But the thing is that there's no research to back it up that women are better talkers or better communicators.
If you look
necessarily.
now, the public relations industry is literally awash with female voices, right? And I listen mainly to
the best PR the best PR people I know happen to be men.
You're way ahead of me. You're way ahead of me. But the women, the bullshitters, are mainly women, and they are the ones who are holding the line. They're the ones who are they're the ones who are thinking on their feet. They're the ones who are coming up with an answer, going, the sausage killed a child, did it? Well, we're confident that the sausage that we make had nothing to do with that. Right?
So, I mean,
and it's mostly women who are doing that stuff.
Yeah, well, that's because employers are discriminating and saying, based on these old myths and the stupid book of Venus and Mars that John Gray came up with, that basically, we'll hire women because they're meant to be better at it. But there's no research to say that. In fact, it's not necessarily true at all. Just like it's saying that by teachers discriminating against students and assuming that women are bad at math. One of my best friends is a math genius. I mean, she's frighteningly math genius. And I know many women that are in that are studying maths in Trinity or UCD or DCU or whatever. So the things, all these stereotypes are very unhelpful.
But what's interesting is that this woman, right, is basically saying that a lot of the things that we, for instance, why is Jenny Houston not as excited about Band of Brothers as Ryan Tuberty and Gerry Ryan, right? Yeah. I would have put that down to hardwiring of your brain. You're saying that she's saying, no, it's socialising.
But she's not going into preferences for entertainment. What she's really talking about is there any research to back up the fact that men and women communicate completely differently, or that men communicate in a competitive way, that women communicate in a cooperative way, that women are indirect, that men are direct.
But it must surely also be about the things that we hold in prioritise, the things that we see as important. I think men and women have hugely different top tens.
I agree with that. And I think that she would probably agree with that as well. What she's trying to do is debunk the myths that were set out in that original Mars and Venus. And so far, I think she's done a really good job of it. She's kind of saying that most of the tension and miscommunication or conflict is the conflict is really about societal change rather than about men and women not actually understanding each other. We do understand each other, but as you say, like sometimes you just don't want to. You don't want to go along with it, or you don't want to do it. So it's tactical. It's not that you didn't understand. You understood 100%, and you've sort of made her point.
And on an emotional basis, quite frequently, men just don't want to be cut out, and we don't want to be found wanting. For instance, there's a psychiatrist I know, and he would point out that, when talking to men and women together, almost inevitably, women would talk, and the man would say nothing. Now, I don't put that down to the fact that the man couldn't say anything. The man just didn't want to, and the man was going, Jesus Christ, let me out of this room soon, please.
Precisely.
Because I have a pain in my nuts listening to this.
And I mean, and that's a recurring theme in Mars and Venus literature, is that men's allegedly underdeveloped capacity for empathy and for caring. That's one of the things. And this is one of the things that isn't, and like she's saying that basically that...
So do you go along with it? Do you accept that the guys just don't want to do it?
Oh, I absolutely would say that it's a choice, or that it's tactical, or because I know it was the case.
I'm willing
as well.
to admit that.
It's like I remember before a boyfriend saying to me that I had hearing problems, that I was deaf, and I was clearly just selectively tuning him out. I'd become deaf to Chris rather than anything else. And the poor guy. So I actually got my ears tested, and my doctor sort of said to me,
"Did you?"
I did. I thought, well, my boyfriend keeps saying that I don't hear him, and I was tuning him out if he was bothering me when I was watching TV, which is a very typically male behavior. Apparently, I was watching a show and he was babbling, and I was like, whatever, so I wasn't deaf. I just tuned him out. So anyway, I think, it's not a male or female thing is my point. It's a, whatever, but it's like these...
Well, what's our conclusion? Because since we're coming up close to 11, where's this going to lead us?
Well, basically, what she's just acknowledging is that any of the shift and in culture or whatever between men's and women's attitude is that it's not that men can't care, it's not that women are doing most of the caring, but that what's changed is that now that women are working, whatever, all of a sudden everything's up for negotiation. So it's a lot of domestic tasks are still falling on the women, and women are kind of wondering why that's the case, and that's naturally leading to conflict because they're like, why am I working full time and still doing the cooking, the cleaning, the grocery shopping, all that sort of stuff? So it's just natural that that's going to become a problem in a relationship. And And then she's referring to the fact that now that elite women are contracting out some of those traditional duties. So that, again, it's a social change. And so elite women are resolving the problem by contracting out what is still regarded as their work to less privileged women, paying nannies, paying cleaners, paying carers.
They're going back 100 years then.
Exactly. Yeah. So that what's changed is that as middle class women have the same access to the same privileges as men, then suddenly now it's falling on the less privileged women to pick up the old traditional roles of women because society still hasn't adapted.
But isn't that fascinating? That the way that the women who can are dealing with this issue is going back to Victorian times,
because they haven't won the battle with the men yet. The duties haven't been split 50-50 as yet. So the only way to offload the duties that are still kind of falling on them is to get another woman to help them with it.
And pay her.
Yep.
Okay.
So it's interesting. So it's really more about societal change.
It's more than interesting.
Yeah, it is.
It's pretty crucial.
Yeah, and the thing is, and when she gets into, which we, is a completely different show really, is that these sort of myths of Mars and Venus and miscommunication are frightening when you look at the judicial system and on things like rape cases and rape trials. That, women are having to prove that they communicated directly to men that they did not want to be raped, as opposed to, because if any indirect language
may I suggest that I might not like to be raped?
Exactly. That, perhaps the man misunderstood you. Perhaps you weren't using direct language enough. That kind of thing, which is just frightening when you look at it that way. So when you're looking at it between a couple, you kind of go, indirect. I didn't understand what you meant. I didn't know when you meant that, the trash was full, that you wanted me to take it out. That kind of thing. So that those myths have carried over into the legal system, which is really damaging in that context. When it's fighting about garbage.
I'm not sure whether I completely agree with that. I think that's more to do with timeline.
Well, there's massive research on it. It's quite frightening.
Yeah, but everybody knows, whether you're male or female, when an act of violent sexual aggression is taking place.
But why still, in most cases, is it you basically the onus has been put on the defendants, or to sort of prove that they communicated clearly that they did not want to be.
Well, that shouldn't be the case.
No.
That should not be the case. Because even if you succeed in a defence of believing that, in fact, you were just involved, for instance, in some sort of rough and tumble sex, I think basically if you examine the heart and the mind of the guy who's been accused of that, you'll find that he bloody well does know what he's been up to.
But that's increasingly the case, that the male rapists are using it as a defence, that they misunderstood the signals, or that they didn't.
And that they're now living in a world of feisty women who God only knows what they might want. Okay, on that note, we'll leave it.
Happy note.
As usual, you've thrown several hand grenades into a very large flock of pigeons. Jenny Houston, good morning.
19 to 92. Gerry Ryan on 2FM.
It's hard to believe after the hype and build-up to Super Tuesday that the polls are now closed in all 24 states. And today, on Ordinary Wednesday, as we're referring to it here, we're forensically analysing the results. Well, we're not really. We're going to try and explain some of it that's less difficult to understand to you. Joining me in studio this morning to help us with this task is a man well qualified to do so, Mr. Thomas Foley, the American ambassador to Ireland, who will, regardless of the outcome, and this is important, remain as the American ambassador until the 20th of January next year, when the present President of the United States of America vacates his office. Ambassador Foley, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Gerry.
Actually, it is. Let's start with that. An ambassador, when you are given the invitation to take up this very privileged position and responsibility, is it politics?
Well, it depends. In the U.S., about 40 of the ambassadorships are what they call political appointees, which are not career foreign service people, and I'm one of them. Ireland is always a political appointment because it's a very important relationship for an administration because of the large Irish-American population, but also the relationship between our countries. So when you say political, it is...
Well, you know what that means in Ireland? It means you've done something that you now get paid back for.
Oh,
Tom, come on in. You've been so nice to us here.
Well,
hasn't he? Give him Ireland.
It's a great privilege to serve. So, yeah, it is. It's an honor to do it.
But you're also a businessman. I think that's very important.
I was pulled out of the business sector to do this.
When you're sent here, that's important, because what we're hoping is that you guys are going to be, continuing to establish and maintain that economic link between the two countries, and that that your inland revenue guys won't get too excited and stop American companies washing their profits through here, because we like that.
Yeah, well, I think a variety of backgrounds represented in diplomatic posts is an advantage, but the theory behind political appointees in the U.S. is that a close relationship with the White House is more important than foreign policy experience, certainly in certain posts and under certain circumstances. So if you say political is just a payoff for having done something it's really not. There's a reason.
There's a more adult reason.
Exactly.
Now, are you surprised, Tom, at the level of interest? I mean, I wasn't being facetious when in my opening remarks this morning, said that I was quite sure that in all of the political constituencies throughout Ireland, you will find people who are interested in both the Republican and the Democrat campaign for the nominees, and who may even know the names of them, who may, God forbid, even understand the differences in policy or even in an approach to policy, and who may be staying up last night, not just to watch things like the Super Bowl, but to actually watch some of this stuff unfold, and maybe they don't even know the name of their own local TD here in Ireland.
Well, it's wonderful for me to see the level of interest here, and I've been quite amazed, both totally independently of the presidential race. You know, I was here during the elections last summer, and the interest in politics here is higher than I would say we have in the U.S. And it's wonderful because that's an important contributor to making democracy work well. But it's also, in this instance, I think a lot of things are coming together. I think the world's getting to be a smaller place. People realize all over the world how important elections are in other countries, and particularly in the U.S. So that's a phenomenon, but it's also a very exciting race. I mean, this is like the our Super Bowl on Sunday night, which was decided in the last 23 seconds or something. And interestingly, Super Tuesday was named Super Tuesday.
Why is it named Super Tuesday?
Well, because there are 22 states that go into primaries on that day, and so many delegates are at stake that it was presumed that Super Tuesday would decide and anoint a candidate. But guess what? We're in overtime, certainly on the Democratic side.
Well, now, what's going to happen here is that we've got two very powerful candidates, two very different candidates from the Democratic side. And they could quite conceivably, even though there is 100 delegates in the difference at the moment, but they're still counting between Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. But they could conceivably continue on until the early months of the summer. Now, the effect of that is intriguing, because if it had been Barack Obama this morning or Hillary Clinton, it would have been time to load up your Republican rifle and start taking shots. That's not going to happen. What's going to be the impact of that? Do they get a free run until the summer?
Do you mean the
Democrats? I mean, they don't get... I mean, if it had been decided, and John McCain was the man, say, from the Republicans' point of view, and if it had been a good old-fashioned Super Tuesday, now you would have had people regrouping and going, okay, it's time to start hitting the policies. It's time to start digging up the dirt. It's time to start finding out that thing that he did with the chorus girl. It's time to start doing all that stuff.
Well, there's plenty of that going on, even so. But
that can't happen if you've got these two powerful candidates still hurtling forward.
Well, one of the interesting things about the primary process is you get people from the same party challenging each other on the issues and all the things you mentioned and digging up dirt. And then when a nominee is anointed, if you will, they start switching over to attacking the other party. So that will be postponed on the Democratic side, because they have to win the nomination first before they can focus.
But that's good news for them, isn't it?
Good news for
the Democrats, because it means you don't get to eviscerate them until summer.
Well, I think most people would take the other view, and that is
really?
Sure, because they're spending money eviscerating each other.
Did you not get the impression that somebody had hauled them in? I don't know who it could be, and said, you two really need to relax and be a bit more presidential when you're in public with one another, and please cut down the sniping.
Yeah, there was a little knuckle rapping going on there at one point, but anyway, I think if John McCain, as it appears, ends up having a very significant lead here and the presumed nominee on the Republican side, he'll get to save some money and save his energy and start focusing on the general election. But the two Democratic candidates are going to have to keep spending money and focusing on each other. So I think it's an advantage for the Republicans to have a designated candidate earlier rather than later.
Now, there is a tendency, because the Republican race is not as sexy. It is, by its very nature, about more conservative issues. Barack Obama is without doubt a fantastic public speaker. I do get a lot of Martin Luther King. Sometimes some of it, wonderfully eloquent, but maybe a little sort of, well, whatever, Hillary Clinton is always very specific. We're hearing a lot about that. We're hearing a lot about what she says and about what he says. We're hearing about her attitude towards welfare. We're hearing about her attitude towards foreign policy, employment, immigration. Barack Obama talks about these issues as well. I have to say, I think Samantha Power talks about them in more detail, really, than he does. But nonetheless, we are getting a good sense that there's something very exciting happening on the Democrat side. We don't hear much about what's happening with the Republicans. I don't think too many people know how strongly John McCain feels about the same issues. And obviously he does.
Well, I think one of the remarkable things we're seeing on the Democratic side is the power of emotion, if you will, in the political arena. And I think you have two candidates. I think Senator Clinton is one who is very focused on the issues, and when she speaks, she speaks to the issues and to constituencies. And Senator Obama is someone who talks in much broader themes. He's a person who has tremendous personal appeal and very high likability. And in politics, you can't underestimate the value of that, because most people, even people who are very interested in politics and issues and take the time to become well informed, are swayed by personal and likability issues and just whether or not they feel an emotional attachment to the candidate. And I think you're seeing these two contrasts here on the Democratic side.
Are fascinating. He's saying, this is our time. Our movement is real. It's borderline, we're going to the mountaintop. But you do get kind of excited. And I can imagine if I was a blue-collar worker listening and looking to this, whether I was white or black, I'd be moved by it. Will it make me vote for him? I don't know.
Well, it's also important to understand that a president doesn't cross T's and dot I's on legislation, and some presidents are too detailed on governing and legislative issues and policy. For example, President Carter was criticized for that. And so it maybe isn't necessarily a bad thing that you have somebody who's thinking in broad themes and describing a general direction, because that's about as much as a president really can do.
Now, for our listeners this morning, who are the other Republican candidates?
What do you mean? You mean left standing?
Yeah, left standing.
Well, it was very interesting, the results last night, that McCain obviously won California. That was a big blow for Governor Romney, I think.
And a surprise, I think, for Romney.
Well, I don't know how much it was hope and how much it was based on real information, but in any case, he didn't prevail there. And in the southern states where Governor Romney's been trying to appeal as a conservative, Governor Huckabee prevailed. So
was Governor Huckabee praying? I mean, what did he, because the evangelicals, it looks like they rode in there big time.
Well, they certainly didn't buy Governor Romney's appeal to them. And did by Governor Huckabee's. I think they would more easily see Governor Huckabee because he's from that part of the country, and he's a Baptist minister. So he's.
Is it unfair to say that that's it? That's his high watermark now
for Governor Romney?
Yeah.
Well, I think now because of the lead that Governor McCain has, I think you'll see the maneuvering on the Republican side being who's going to be the vice presidential choice of McCain. And I'm sure Governor Romney would be interested in at least having the opportunity to consider that. But I assume Governor
is that a given?
Too.
Is that your also ran badge? Is that whatever he spent by now, $34 million or whatever? Is that what it costs to be vice president? And there's more to spend. God,
well, I'm sure that Governor Romney didn't go into this hoping to be vice president, and actually, I think he would be an unlikely choice by Senator McCain.
What do you think of John McCain? We've got this war veteran. I was looking at him on the television this morning. I went, something? This guy, He's very strong. He's articulate. He seems to cross a lot of borders when it comes to the age issue as well. And he's an attractive personality. And then you realise the man's in his 70s. You know, like, he's a strong son of a gun. I wouldn't rule him out at all.
No, he's very vital and sharp and high energy. You just listen to him speak, and you can. He's not a retiring person at all. But hey, he has an unbelievable record. He was a POW for 7 years. He's
hanging by his hands for 2 years in a camp.
Yeah, that couldn't have been very fun. And so I think
he's patient.
Anyway, he's had a breadth of experience. But I'll tell you another interesting thing that's happened as a result of his coming out. First of all, this is a remarkable rise from the dead. I mean, if you go back,
he was dead. Yeah.
In September, everybody had completely written him off. So that in itself is an astounding achievement. But he also appeals to independents. So I think the fact that he has emerged as the Republican candidate means that any shot of Michael Bloomberg getting in here is gone, because I think his opportunity was to come in and grab independents if it was a conservative Republican running against.
Can you describe what independents mean in American terms? Because if you say that to an Irish voter or even a European voter, you're talking about sort of lone star politics, really. You know, you're people who actually try and frequently do make alliances with other major political constituencies. But that's not what you're talking about when you're talking about American politics.
No, you're not. It's very easy to get confused. But we have two major parties. There's some other parties, but basically Republicans and Democrats. So when you go to register to vote, you register with a party, either Republican or Democrat. But you don't have to register as affiliated with a party, so you register as an independent. That means you're not a member of a party. And as I'd say over the last 25 or 30 years,
they're the floaters.
Yeah, they don't identify with either party, and what you presume is they're somewhere in the middle.
But one would say they're the healthiest part of the electorate, because they're the guys who should be hoping what's best for the Republic, what's best for my family is what I'm going to vote for. I don't care who it is.
Well, I don't think the Democrats and Republicans who are registered would necessarily agree with that. But
no, I know
you're probably right. They might be the most reasonable people in the room, or the most open to being persuaded on something that they haven't already accepted as true. The interesting thing, though, is that in presidential politics, about 40% of the electorate is going to vote Democrat, no matter who the candidate is, and the same is true of Republicans. So you're really only fighting over the 20% in the middle, and many of them are they're undecided. Republicans and Democrats and independents.
What do you think is going to sway them? Is it going to be Iraq? Is it going to be those body bags? Is it going to be the economy, the falling position of the dollar, the international perception of America, which really seems to be hurting Americans for the first time ever this last year? I heard Americans over drinks, over dinner, over what's saying to me in the United States, what do people in Ireland think of us? What do people in France think of us? I never heard that before, ever. Honestly, ever. And I think that is a huge issue. So which is the big issue that will sway that 20%?
Well, Iraq is certainly a polarizing issue, but I think it's diminishing as the economy becomes more of an issue for people. And if you recall back to the '92 election, the mantra of the Clinton campaign was the economy stupid, and that seems to be true in politics over and over again. A lot of people are against the war in Iraq and would like to have the troops come home. I think all the candidates are going to need to offer some sort of plan in Iraq for a timeline, what's the level of commitment and for how long. And the voters are, I think, going to demand that.
So is it going to be immigration? Is it going to be welfare? Is it going to be jobs? Is it going to be the way that you're viewed by the rest of the world? Is it going to be Iraq? Or is it going to be... What'll it be?
Well, foreign policy is in the U.S., because it's such a big country and so much of what affects people's lives in the U.S. it happens in the U.S., which is not necessarily true in smaller countries. But foreign policy tends to be a second order of business. The economy, I mentioned, and other domestic issues. And historically in the States, foreign policy doesn't really change very much from one administration to another. It's just sort of the way our system works. And so I think that Americans tend to assume that foreign policy is pretty much going to follow its course. And again, as I said, in major themes, if you had a president who was elected based on having said that they were going to get the troops home as soon as possible, versus someone who said, we're going to stay until we're prevailed.
100 years until we win.
Yeah, but the actual difference
or John
between
McCain
those two,
to the gates of hell.
Yeah, the actual difference between those two in terms of months or years might be very small in the actual actions that were taken and what was done. So I think Iraq will be important, but maybe not as important as the economy.
Okay, if Iraq doesn't decide necessarily, and if the economy does, probably, which is absolutely correct. And when we were speaking to Barack Obama's foreign policy expert, Samantha, I said, it doesn't matter who ends up in the White House, whether it's John McCain, whether it's Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton, they're all Lyndon Johnson, because even if they have the most exalted and spectacular plans and they're the most decent and honest people, and no matter how many breaths of fresh air they have in their back pocket, they've got Vietnam in the back room just waiting to continually take the headlines, drain them of energy, sap them of initiative. And if I was going for, there's little likelihood of that, if I was going for that would be the thing that, in the quieter moments I go, that's going to bite us when we get in there. Each time we go to do something noble, Iraq will come back.
Well, I hope that's not true. It certainly could be, but I think... it
did it for Lyndon B. Johnson.
Yeah, that's true, but I think attempts to compare Iraq with Vietnam are...
You don't buy that, do you?
No, because... no.
Hold on, Tom, loads of American guys miles away, billions of dollars being spent, an unwinnable war. They're pretty close.
Yeah, unwinnable. You're saying unwinnable. That's interesting. I think a lot of people in the States actually think that...
Do you think the surge has worked?
The outcome in Iraq will be what the administration had set as its goal, which is representative government, recognition of basic human rights, and rule of law. It's not that ambitious a goal, and I think that most people who are involved and understand the situation think that will be the outcome. It's just a question of how long will it take and how much will it cost, and those. So I think it's that it will eventually succeed, but somebody 20 years from now is going to have to decide whether or not it was worth the cost and all the pain.
That's a very good point. We're going to take a quick break. 1850 715 922. Back after these.
Before now, safe meant dull. Before now, safe meant, well, safe. But that was before the Citroën C4 Style Plus. Because as well as being the safest car in its class, it's also the coolest with climate control, Bluetooth phone system, cruise control, front fog lights, 16-inch alloys, 6 airbags and 5-star Euro NCAP protection. Citroën C4 Style Plus from €21,495, plus delivery and related charges.
Did you know one property website offers something myhome.ie simply can't match? That website is propertynews.com, and that something is more choice. Thousands and thousands of homes you won't see anywhere else. One of them could be the place you're looking for, because the more choice you have, the more chances of finding that perfect home. Visit propertynews.com. Your search isn't complete without us. Based on an independent audit of residential homes in the Republic of Ireland by Millward Brown Ulster, listed for sale on 2nd of January 2008 on myhome.ie and propertynews.com.
Welcome back. We have Ambassador Tom Foley, Ambassador to Ireland from the United States in studio this morning on this Wednesday. Super Tuesday, of course, still continuing, Tom. It's the count is far from over, really, even though the big numbers have come in.
Well, California, which is a very big state, was pivotal in both, or maybe not pivotal. I think it was more pivotal on the Republican side, but certainly very closely watched on the Democratic side. Hillary appears to have won there, but it's kind of interesting because California has only 6% of the population is African American, and a very high percentage of the population, I think something like 32%, is Hispanic. And the Senator Clinton seems to score quite well on the Hispanic vote. But within the numbers, the white vote in California went about 40% Obama and 60% Clinton, which is a pretty significant pickup from the white vote in South Carolina, which was about 25% Obama and 75% Clinton. So if that's read as rather than two totally different populations in different states, rather than that, but a trend in momentum, that would be a good sign for Senator Obama.
So he's still in there, even though there's 100 seats.
Oh, well, he actually, I think, won more delegates.
Did he?
Yesterday than
but the
Senator
overall
Clinton.
picture is about 100 ahead for Clinton, isn't it, at the moment?
Yes, but I think yesterday something like 841 went to Obama and 838 went to Senator Clinton. But she won bigger states, more important states, New Jersey, New York, and California.
Now, when you say more important states, I mean, she was well able to name the number of states, then give the actual names of the states early this morning that she had succeeded in. Obama was not able to do that because there were so many of them.
Well, and that's right. She won 8 and he won 13, and I think one is yet undecided. But what was so interesting was the states he won. He won Minnesota, and he won states that you would not have expected him to win. And he won all of the states, I believe, that were caucuses he won. So
and what do you put that down to?
Well, I think it's what you have to look at here is momentum. I think the insiders are trying to judge his momentum, because his momentum has certainly been positive and moving in his direction. And I think what people are trying to figure out is if how rapidly does that have to continue for him to pass Senator Clinton and win the nomination.
Now, this is the difficult one. Can you explain to us exactly how this voting takes place? Because the very early stages seem to be people meeting in school gym halls, and one set of people going on one side of the hall and going aye, and then another set of going no, and then the remainers saying okay, I'll go over. Then I was going, okay, so it's a show of hands thing. Then the next primary comes along, it's not that, it's you got to be registered. It's quite confusing. It seems to be a different, for every primary, every few primaries, there seems to be a different system as to how you and who votes.
Right. Well, how many days do you have for me to sit here and explain it to you? But it's very complicated.
I mean,
there are 50 different states.
Were the founding fathers drunk?
Well, one of the great things about our system is that you have 50 states. You have many different levels of government. You have local government. You have state government. You have county governments. And every one of them is different. Every one of them was formed by some committee that never made sense to begin with. But it gives a tremendous amount of diversity to the system. They say that there are two things you never want to watch made. One is sausage, and the other is legislation. Now, I would add to that list how a primary works, because the more you know about it, maybe the less confidence you'd have in the process. So some of it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and it is people standing around in rooms and going to schools, and every state, as I said, has its own system, and every party has its own system, but it makes it a very rich and colorful process. I think the most notable distinction is between caucuses and primaries.
And what is that?
Well, a primary, you go down to a voting booth and you vote, and it's a statewide election.
Okay, that's pretty clear. That's simple to understand.
It's very similar to a general election, but you would only be able to vote if you were registered in your party, or some states allow independents to vote. And in some states allow people from the other party to cross over. I think most states have gotten rid of that because it was getting gamed. But a caucus is, as you said, where people are meeting in large rooms.
In conclave.
Yeah. And it sort of works a little bit like your representational voting system, where somebody gets knocked out because they don't have enough votes, and then the people who were standing in his or her corner, but move over to another corner.
We don't do it by putting our hands up.
I know. Hey,
you're not worried that there could be
Americans don't have enough to do.
Heaven forbid a tiny bit of abuse.
Stand around in rooms all day long.
And one thing I do notice is that there is no contest of the results. I mean, there doesn't seem to be much contention in terms of what seems to be some of these votes less than scientific process.
Well, that's correct, and I think with technology, things are probably going to get better. But they're when I go and vote in my hometown in Connecticut, there are 3 people there, and they've got a big book, and they're sifting through reams of paper, and they say, "Yes, Mr. Foley, we have you down here, and you can go into the booth." And you can easily see that when you have hundreds of millions of people going through that exercise, there not only can be mistakes, but there are opportunities for the system to be gamed. But they're pretty good traditions of trying to eliminate voter fraud. Doesn't say that it doesn't happen from time to time, but I don't think it happens on any large scale.
One of the questions I was asked by my son this morning, who woke up twice, and I was dropping him to school, which was actually a record for this week. First thing he said was, "So Clinton's president?" And I said, "No." I said, "They're only voting as to who might be actually nominated as a candidate to president." "Oh Christ," he said, that's so that's going to go on until summer. I said, "Yeah." I said, "It's a long process." And then they started mentioning the figures, the amount of money that was being spent. And he said, "Wow, that sort of rules out a lot of people in that race, doesn't it?" And I said, "Yeah, this is a very, very expensive game. Big money. I mean, Astro bucks."
I agree with everything you said, except that it takes a lot of money to play. The presumption was that a candidate needs to have personal resources. That's absolutely not true, and none of these candidates, except Governor Romney, have any significant personal resources. So it does take a lot of money, but the money comes from other people, and you can only contribute $2,500 to a presidential race, and another $2,500 to the nomination to the primary season.
So to get the kind of figures, the $50 and the $60 million type of figures that we're talking about, fundraising is everything.
You need the money, and I'll explain why in a second, why I actually think it's a good thing. But $2,500 or $5,000 if you wanted to also contribute to the primary season would be a lot of money certainly for most people. But it's for people who can afford it. It's not enough money from any one person to influence anybody, certainly at a presidential level. So it doesn't corrupt the amount of money that an individual can give.
And in the United States,
nobody's getting road contracts.
The president of General Electric can't give $10 million. You can't do that.
No, you can't give more than the amount. Now, what does happen is people who are interested in supporting candidates and helping candidates get elected, they can invest the time and make phone calls, give cocktail receptions, organize.
I've been at them.
Yep. Yeah. Senator Clinton had a fundraiser here, and President Clinton showed up for it. So that's how money's raised, and I can't remember the name of the couple who hosted that here, but people like that can put themselves in positions where they assist or act as intermediaries in gathering. Yes, of course. Mm-hmm.
Well, Ambassador Foley, it's been a pleasure having you in here. I think we are some the wiser, so you have to be congratulated on that.
Thanks.
Of course, you do, regardless of what the outcome is, you stay until next January.
Correct.
And after that, do you go back to private enterprise?
I'll go back to business, yes.
You say that with a tone of satisfied resignation.
What do you mean?
Because you look like you've been enjoying yourself here.
Oh, I love it here. Yeah, this has been a great experience. Yeah, I'm Irish American, but I've learned a lot about my roots and my culture and my DNA by coming back here and
you give good parties too. You know, I like these intercultural exchanges that you're doing some more of them soon. I'd like another night out.
Yeah. Yep, I've got one with Sean Scully coming up on March 12th, one of my arts and culture dinners.
Okay, Tom Foley, thank you very much indeed. We've got more to watch and look and listen, so we appreciate you giving of your time this morning.
Thank you for having me on the show, Jerry.
Thank you.